Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and today I'm joined by Aaron Shelley. He is an engineer with an MBA. His work with many small businesses and startups created his unique systems perspective across marketing, operations, customer support, sales, and product development. From his extensive work within the academic and business world, he has come to understand and deeply appreciate how related our family dynamics are to them. Aaron shows how we can make our families more successful by thinking about our families more holistically through a business lens. Topics such as why dating, conflict, divorce, parenting, investing, money management, family roles, and developing generational wealth become easier by just thinking about them through this lens. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Magic. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. This is kind of a very large tangent, I guess, going from business to family. And some of the listeners will probably be thinking, well, how can you apply, these techniques, these practices? So I'm looking forward to delving into this.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people have been. That's why I'm excited to talk with people and help them see it, because I think it gives a lot of clarity to our lives.
Perfect. All right. I start the podcast with the same 3 questions to my guests, and everyone gives me a different answer. So here comes your first one. And that is, what can your expertise do to accelerate health? Not just physical health, but also emotional and spiritual health.
Yeah. So in the business model, as I look at it, we talk a lot about financial health all the time. But if you look at the source of a lot of our mental health issues, I think they're actually stemming from a resource we've largely ignored, which is our social resources, our relationships, our group affiliations. And those are some of the big places that I think we've neglected. And then the lack of social resources then is cascading into our human resources, as I call them, our health, our spiritual health, our emotional, our physical health. All those things I think are manifestations of there's a problem. And I think our body is trying to tell us some of those things. There's a problem, but often we don't realize it's because we're not connected to ourselves, to our society, to our families, those type of things.
So we also talk about wealth. And people think wealth is just the financial, but it can also be personal and emotional wealth. So what are your top 3 tips to creating wealth?
Yeah, I agree. Financial wealth is an essential part in our families, but I think relationship wealth is probably as important, if not more important. If we have all this money and then our children hate us because we never spent time in relationships, or our spouse doesn't like us, or we have no friends, then that's a big problem. So I think my take is we need to look at this holistically. Yes, we need financial wealth so we can survive, but we also need to invest in our relationships, in good groups. Of course, if there's toxic people that are causing you negatives, you have to get away from those. And a lot of times we're like, we need to invest time in our children. We need to invest time in our spouse relationships. We need to invest time in our communities. I think if, at the end of our lives, we can't take our money with us, but all the influence and all of the good that we've done through our relationships is what will stay and support everything we love in this world. So that's kind of where I think we need to have that type of wealth, the social wealth and those connections. And then I think for us personally, we need to have purpose. You can do very bad jobs, and if you have purpose, you feel like you're wealthy. I've watched families, I had a friend who committed suicide. I've had all sorts of mental health issues around me. And I think, man, I feel wealthy because I have certain beliefs. I have certain skills, certain ways of thinking that have helped me, get through those. So I think to limit wealth, to your point about money is bad. I think it's money, it is your relationships, and it's also your skills and your health physically. Any one of those, if they're missing, you're going, would you want to be sick and a billionaire? That's not fun. Or do you want to be a billionaire and no one likes you? That's also not fun. It's not a healthy, wealthy life. So I think it's this combination of wealth, social wealth, and then also human wealth.
And my final standard question is around weight loss. Many people look at coaches and, professionals and go, well, they've never had a weight problem. What would they know? So my first part of the question is, have you ever battled your weight? If so, how did you win that battle? And if not, what can you offer the listeners around what you've observed around weight and stress?
I'm about, 30 to 40 pounds heavier than I was when I was in high school. I like to attribute that to muscles. I've which I think we all do. Hey, there's a reason for this. No, the thing that I've focused on is much more, if I have the weight problem, is there something underneath it? Am I dealing with stress through eating? Am I dealing with an underlying problem through, am I bored and so I'm eating? Is there something missing in my life that's pushing me in that direction? Because I think our bodies are they're like sensors on a car. They tell you something's wrong, but a lot of times we don't understand that. So for me, if I feel myself getting out of whack and I feel myself gaining weight, then I'm like, okay, I need to pull back. I need to think about if there's some underlying problem or stress. I've kind of stabilized my weight where I feel pretty good about it. And that's been, what foods I eat. I try to be healthy, eating a good diet generally. I still eat candy and those things, but I try to do that not all the time, sparingly. I try to remove those from the house. So part of it's been like structural things where just remove a lot of the temptations, but then also solve the underlying problems. If I'm bored, it may be that I just need to interact with people more. I need more meaning in my life. If I'm doing it out of stress, how do I solve the stress problem and focus on that? So those are the things that I've done. And I've got to a point where I feel like my weight's pretty healthy for where I'm at. But yeah, I've kind of been on that, watching my weight go up and then watching it go down. And it's just, what are the sensors telling me in my body that I'm not paying attention to?
So that's our standard questions. Now I want to open the floor to you. How can you apply business dynamics and business growth techniques to things like marriage, dating, and mental health?
All right. So when I look at, we'll start a little bit from a business side so that we kind of have this common ground. If you look at a company like Google, they have a business model, and they're part of that business model is a strategy. What are they trying to accomplish with their money, with all their resources that they have? And their current strategy is trying to organize the world's data. And then they have some structure. How do we structure our company? Well, we have to give people a lot of freedom. We try to reduce the number of meetings because we want a lot of creativity in solving a lot of big problems. So they have that's their structure. And then for their culture, there's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of, you want to work at 2 a.m., you can. Whatever you're most productive at, you do that. So that's kind of Google. And if we contrast that with Walmart, their strategy, or, some big box place, their strategy is, how do we help people live well? And so we need to provide low-cost things to them so they have money to provide for their families. That's their strategy. And then their structure is, we need a lot of people to come in on time. We have a lot of moving pieces. Everyone needs to, it's like synchronizing an assembly line. So there's much more structure than they have at Google. And then the culture is, you don't have a lot of freedom and responsibility. It's a lot of, are you predictable? Can we trust you to come in? There's a different value set there. And so if you compare those two, you couldn't take Google's strategy and give it to Walmart. You couldn't take Walmart's strategy and give it to Google, and nor could you take any of their culture and move them over. It just wouldn't work. And that's where you see in business, there's a lot of different business models. Facebook, Apple, Google, all these companies have different ways they're making money, different ways they treat employees, different compensation, all those type of things. So if we take that over to a family, we look and say, what is the strategy of the family? And what is the purpose of the family or the individual? I mean, when I say family, it could be an individual, it could be, a single mother with kids, it could be an extended family. Those are all structures that a family has. And sometimes we don't choose our structure. We get into a bad relationship or a spouse dies, and now all of a sudden our structure changes from a married structure to a blended family structure or a single structure. So those things can change. And then what's our culture? If we want to be a doctor and we don't have the culture of delayed gratification, we don't believe that I need to, do things now that are going to pay off in the future. That culture and that strategy are going to be a mismatch. So a lot of it's looking at our strategy, our structure, and our culture as an individual. And is there any conflict between those things? And then if we get into relationships, if we have a spouse or even with our children, do we have conflict between theirs and ours? Because we kind of want to unify those. Just like in a company, if we were going to start a company and I wanted to start a legal company and you wanted to start an accounting company, we probably shouldn't go into business together. And so I think a lot of times you'll see, in the dating arena, you'll see people who are like, oh, this person is attractive. This girl's attractive. This guy, he's attractive. Let's get married. But then you go, well, we had different goals in life. We have different directions we're going. We have different upbringings, different cultures. And then you start to see all the conflict appearing because they haven't come together as a unit. And there may not be a way for them to come together, right? If there's some women I know that were raised in a home where their dad was a plastic surgeon, he made a ton of money and it was a stable work and there was very little volatility. And then you have someone who wants to be, who grew up with an entrepreneurial background. A lot of instability, a lot of chaos, money's up and down. You don't know what's going on all the time. If you have a woman or a man from the plastic surgeon family marry into this other family, you're going to have these weird conflicts around how we spend money. What are we trying to accomplish? And so I think it's very useful when you're dating to look at what are you trying to accomplish in life? For instance, if the woman's like, I want to work, I want to have a business, that's my top priority. I don't even want children. Or maybe I want one. And then the husband's like, well, I want to be an executive and I want to be super driven. Well, okay, who's going to take care of the kids? Are you guys even going to have time with each other? You can work through some of those logistics, but quite often you'll look at that and say, well, I wanted 5 kids and I wanted my wife to stay home. Or I wanted my wife to have her own business and I wanted my husband to prioritize differently. There's not just like in Walmart and Google in the business sense, there's not a right business model for every family, right? A husband could make money and then he could get sick and then the wife needs to step up. Or maybe she's working and then he's at home. There's so many different dynamics that are at play that you can't say, hey, there's only one right way to do a family. Because life's complicated, we get old, we get sick. We also transition through different periods. For my wife and I, when we started to have children, that's a lot of effort and energy that her body literally is putting into that child. And we had 4 children, so we needed to invest in our children heavy when they're young. And then once they're through that investment period and they, 5 or 6 is the youngest, then they're at school. And my wife's like, now I have time, less demand. So you're kind of going through different business models and different demands. And if you're flexible with those demands, then I think you can make a great life. But if you're inflexible, then you can have problems. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So we've established that there could be some differences, say in dating, as an example, someone brought up by entrepreneurs, someone brought up by the plastic surgeon. How can you get around those differences? Like, how do you work with them?
Well, I think when it comes to working with them, it's first of all, there's a quote, I believe, by Viktor Frankl, something along the lines of, if you have a why, then you can endure almost any how. And I think it's the same in a family. If both of the people are saying, we want this family to work, we have these goals for the family, these longer term goals, then you can understand, well, okay, we want, these long-term goals. We want this wealth built up. We want to be healthy, so we need to buy good food for our home or for our family. Otherwise, we may not be healthy. But then that costs more. how do we make these trade-offs? So that's where you look at it's, if you have the long term and you're together on the goal, then it's easier to make the trade-offs. But if one person's like, well, I super value travel and I need to go on cruises every year and we need to do this as a family, and the other person's saying, that's entertainment. I want to build a real estate empire. I want to put all that money into real estate so that in the long term, when we're 40, 50, we can retire and then we can do cruises. Some of it's like, is it a timing issue, or is it just a complete separate divide where, he wants to be an executive, she wants to be an executive, their jobs pull them in different directions, and ultimately they don't want to come together. So I think it's just like a business. There's a whole bunch of negotiation that needs to go into it. I think there needs to be boundaries set by both parties. Like, that's not something I want to do. That's not something that I'm willing to accept. If I decided right now I wanted to move my family to the Middle East, my wife would probably disagree and we'd have to work through this conflict. So it's really, I think if you have the longer term goals that are important in your life, then it's easier to solve the short term problems. But I find that most people, if you were to ask them, what is your purpose? What is your mission? At the end of your life, what do you want on your gravestone? I've heard people ask. If you don't really know that, then it's hard to make those decisions. And I also think it's a little harder to be fulfilled in a job, because it doesn't matter what the job is. If you don't have a purpose, it doesn't align with whatever your purpose could be. It's just a drudgery of having to go to work every single day.
Okay, so some people are in that drudgery of going to work every single day, and they might be thinking, well, how do I get out of this? I know some entrepreneurs, and their life, nothing's guaranteed. They have to hustle, they have to do this and that. I'm unhappy where I am, but it's stable. How can people like that start making changes to increase their happiness level and to make their situation work for them?
Yeah, and I've seen this in business. I find that a lot of people in the business world, they'll say, oh, I want to start a new business. Well, yeah, when are you going to make the change? And if you really look, in the book, I talk about these, everyone has the resource of time. That's the human resource. What are we spending our time on? And so when you look at how you're using your time, a lot of times you get into this, well, I don't like what I'm doing. Okay, well, can you stop doing it and switch? If you felt like working at a tech company is not fulfilling for you, well, where do you feel like your purpose is? If your purpose is, helping people in trauma or helping people in these other areas, is there an opportunity for you to switch careers? It might come at a cost of some money, but are you in a place where you can actually try to match up? Because I feel like a lot of spiritual health and fulfillment is much more, are you living your purpose or going towards your mission? And so it's really, if you're looking at it from a monetary standpoint, you really need to live at the level you're living. If you're not happy with lots of money, then maybe money's not the thing, and maybe you should pull back. Maybe you could work part-time, or you could start a side business. I don't know how much time you spend doing podcasts, but that's the thing where it's like, what am I starting to bring people, that's where I talk about this flywheel effect. If I start to interact with good people, then I'll start to interact with more good ideas, and they'll introduce me to good people, and then they'll help me, manage my money better. And then they'll help me with health things and help me, because there's so much, on the healthy, what's not, what is. So there's all these things where you start this flywheel going, and with small investments, just like compound interest on a money side, small investments in other people, small investments in yourself and in your business. Even if you're saying, I don't love my job, I want to do this other thing, let me start, investing in that. Sometimes you actually find, as I've done, like, I really don't like that. Like, oh, now I can be happier where I was, because now I've taken over this. I've explored this thing that I thought would make me happy, and it didn't. So now I can say, that's not longer nagging at me. Or sometimes you go, wow, that's so much, I'm so happy and fulfilled. And then your time starts to get utilized that way. And then those type of people get pulled into your lives. So that's the type of thing it's like, if you're not moving towards your purpose and what you think you could be doing, not even exploring it, like, I wouldn't say, hey, you hate your job, just quit it right now. Well, can you explore it and start talking to other people and being like, I mean, this is where the social connections are. Asking them, well, you're doing a podcast. Is that fun? Is that interesting? Is there money? Those type of things. Or, oh, this person's a banker or a doctor. Maybe a dentist you may look at, or a doctor, and say, this is a great life. And then you find out they feel like they're just working for the man. They feel like they're just every day doing the same thing. They're grinding just the same. And you go, oh, apparently there's an element to this of life that I just hadn't taken into account. So I think, taking some steps in the direction that you think you want to go, it helps you get more clarity on where you want to go. And then if you find it, then especially if you, depending on your relationships, you can usually find ways to find a career that is going to be fulfilling and also is moving you towards your purpose over time. Like, I haven't found many people who really put in that energy and time that then end up unfulfilled.
Definitely. Now, we've covered a fair bit here. Is there something else that you feel the listeners need to hear?
I would say the biggest thing is just making sure you don't get caught up in singular thinking of focusing exclusively on finance. You can't ignore money. You can't ignore finance. But I feel so much pressure from our society that's pushing us towards, I make this much money, or I'm a CEO, or I am this, and I make this amount of money in my bank account, and that's how I'm defined. Whereas if you look at holistically, yes, that should be an element of financial freedom and financial security, but you should also have, I would say, social security, not in the sense of a government program, but your social resources. You have a big group of people who can support you, who will help you, who will help your children, those type of things. And then finally, it's the health resources. Like, are you taking care of your body physically? Are you doing things that are harming your body? Are you using your time well? And I think there's a part of us as humans that wants to learn. So if we're not focused, if we're just focused on finance, I think we get very miserable. But if we focus on finance, the social and the human resources, we can see that we'll become wealthier overall. I actually think you'll make more money if you look at the whole picture rather than just looking at a sub picture. I kind of equate that to, like, in a business, no one would say get rid of your marketing or salespeople. But we do that, it seems like, in the family. Ignore social resources. Well, that's what's going to happen. Your family is going to fail. Your mental health will fail. We are social creatures. We need the social interaction, and we need social purpose. So I think it's really looking at this holistic set of resources instead of just focusing on financial resources.
Great. Now, look, we love freebies here, Aaron, and you have a fantastic one at thefamilyflywheel.com/book resources. Can you tell us about that and what people can find there?
Yeah. So what I have there is some worksheets and a presentation, some things you can go through, some prompts that will help you first go through your family business model and think, well, how is it? What's my strategy, structure, culture? And then it'll also help you go through your resources. I don't think we take into account all the resources we have available. So the prompts can help you go through your resources as well as your goals on those specific resources, right? So what is your financial goal? It shouldn't be around making raw money. In my opinion, it should be around financial freedom, having enough money to do the things that you want and are matching your purpose, your social goals, as well as your human goals. So those are the resources. It also shows this diagram called the Fundamental Family System to help you see the relationship between everything. And then I have what I call a quick investing guide. I call it investing. I'm investing my time to build social resources. I'm investing my time to build human resources. I'm investing in my personal health when I work out. So I call it an investing quick guide that just gives you ideas on ways to build those resources if you need them.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, we've covered everything that I wanted to, and I just wanted to ask you one last thing, and it's kind of left of center. When you see families and friends and the structures breaking down, what are the first things that come to your mind to tell people?
First thing that comes to my mind is sadness. I feel like each family is kind of a pillar in our society, and just like the Colosseum, as we knock those down, at some point it's going to collapse. So when I look at it, I think the biggest thing is examining your strategy and your purpose, because that is going to be your kind of your North Star to helping you know where you're trying to go. And also looking at your culture and the structure, like, are these things good and getting me where I want to go? So I think a lot of people and families get into this isn't my job, this isn't my role. I have this, I'm a guy, so I don't change diapers, I don't make meals, I don't do this type of work, or I'm a woman, so I don't do this. And I think it's in a business, we do whatever needs to get done because we're all in it together. And I think there's been this weird case where I don't feel like we're connecting with each other and getting aligned and saying, we're in this together. This is a family. This is our society's in this together. It's become kind of this, I don't know, single player game, as I call it, where it's not. We're all connected. We need to support each other. Otherwise, we're going to have larger societal problems.
There you go, listeners. We're all connected. We need to do this together. So, reach out to your fellow humans and give them that helping hand. Aaron, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Magic. I appreciate the opportunity.
And listeners, thank you so much for your time. For now, go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health, that's holistic with a W, or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.